Afternoon and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is 2 p.m. on Friday, May 11th. This budget hearing, conducted by the Committee on Appropriations and Adjudication, will now reconvene with the Guam Election Commission and the Guam Regional Transit Authority. On behalf of Speaker Benjamin J.F. Cruz, I want to thank everyone for your presence here today as we continue the budget process for fiscal year 2019. We face overwhelming challenges due to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, impacts on the government of Guam's revenue stream. Given such austere times, Speaker found it prudent that the Committee on Appropriations have a different tone and approach to the budget hearings. The continued implication that past patterns of appropriation levels will no longer be taken as granted. Prior to this hearing, the Speaker sent a letter to each agency present today asking that you provide testimony answering specific questions relative to your agency's missions, how you measure the achievement of your missions, and other relevant matters. In prior fiscal years, the committee had taken an incremental budget approach and had requested your agency to justify any additional funding above your existing funding level. For this fiscal year, the Speaker and the Committee on Appropriations and Adjudication is engaging in a zero-based budgeting approach, which does not start with the prior fiscal year's funding level to justify next fiscal year's funding level. Rather, we take a deeper look into each agency's budgets from the ground up. Given the likelihood of decreased revenues from which to fund government services for our people, we must take a closer look at each and every agency of this government and not be bound to what we have always provided in the past. Some may have Googled the zero-based budgeting, ZBB, and found that there is no true consensus in which ZBB is operationalized. I'll reiterate for the Speaker, as he wanted to clarify to everyone that the zero-based budgeting approach the committee intends on taking is more a shift in mindset, and as we continue this budget process, the public should be aware that what was provided for in the past is not what the committee will be solely basing decisions on for the future. The committee is doing everything it can to show the people of Guam that we are committing to a ground-up approach because the current fiscal environment calls for it. With that said, I would like to invite the representatives from the Guam Election Commission to join us at the table. And before we begin with any presentation by the Guam Election Commission, I want to recognize the senators who have joined us this afternoon for this budget hearing. Senator Tommy Morrison, thank you very much, Senator, for joining us. And also Senator Mary Camacho Torres. Thank you, Senator, for joining us this afternoon. Ms. Pangilinan, if you could just identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Hafade Guahu Simaria Pangilinan, Executive Director, Guam Election Commission. Hafade Senators, I respectfully come before you to submit the Guam Election Commission fiscal year 2019 budget request for $1,809,292 that will cover expenditures for the 2018 general election to be held on Tuesday, November 6, 2018. And the Guam Election Commission will continue its quest to establish best practices for Guam elections. The Guam Election Commission is the vessel of representative democracy. Guam Election Commission performs duties and powers which encompass executive, legislative, as well as judicial functions in the conduct of Guam elections, as mandated by the Election Code of Guam, Title III, Chapters 1 to 21. The GEC is also designated as the state election office for conducting federal elections. Updates and upgrades to the election process are submitted with the election comparative analysis reports to Legislatura in Guam every odd year. Election data are compiled and summarized in the election comparative analysis reports that have been published since 1976. We have prepared a fiscal year 2019 budget presentation reflecting 17 full-time employees with 1 vacancy. The GEC operates as a single-level structure. Employees are assigned dynamically as many of election processes are intertwined. We will now begin our PowerPoint presentation. This is the functional chart of the Guam Election Commission. Again, I reiterate, the Guam Election Commission is mandated by the Title III, Guam Code Annotated, Chapters 1 to 21. Next slide, please. Here is the budget summary based on the chapters of the code. For example, Chapter 1 of Title III is General Provisions, and Chapter 21 is the Guam Decolonization Registry. Our total shows towards the right of $1,809,292. The first column represents budget categories besides personnel services. So first column are all the budget categories besides personnel services. Second column indicates the cost of personnel services. Next slide, please. Chapter 2 of Title III establishes the Guam Election Commission. So this is where we put our administrative costs, including my salary. The salaries, as indicated here, represent the line items in the staffing pattern, and it should come up to the correct totals. Next slide, please. Chapter 3 is voter registration. Our voter registration system is housed at the University of Guam Computer Center and the Guam Election Commission. Redundancy is inherent and is required, and so with that, we need $38,500. That is a memorandum of agreement with the University of Guam Computer Center. $41,780 will be used to upgrade. We have not upgraded our hardware, and we need to start replacing them. The next cost item is district registration. This starts 21 days before the election as mandated, and we will hire district registrars for every mayor's office throughout the island. And they will be working inside the mayor's office from 4 o'clock p.m. to 8 o'clock p.m., and they will be doing this for 2 weeks. After the election of November 2018, we will go through a process of canceling registrants who did not vote in 2 consecutive elections. The cost for that is $20,000. Total cost for voter registration other than personnel is $123,680. Throughout this slide presentation, you will notice that employees are assigned to for each chapter. But when election comes, all of us get together and work almost 36 hours straight together, covering all bases of the election system. Next slide, please. Chapter 4 of the title deals with precincts and precinct boards. We hire 335 precinct officials, 5 for each of the 67 precincts, and we train alternates as well. So we will train over a period of 2 months 395 precinct officials, including the alternates. Next slide, please. As you all know, Senators, that Ms. Helen Italic of our office really takes care of our candidates and our voters as well as they come in. For Chapter 6, we conduct seminars, and there's one today at 2 o'clock, but the Mini Hatch Act will be presented by the Civil Service Commission. After this hearing, I will run over and conduct the candidate seminar. Next slide, please. Mr. Joey Zecchi is in charge of ballot design and production. Ballot printing costs $10,000. You may notice that we didn't order ballot stock, and that's because we order it when we order primary election ballot stock. Chapter 9 is a big one. That's the conduct of elections. So as you know, next slide, please. Sorry. As you know, the law requires that all election materials, including ballots, must be transported in DPW buses. Also, we hire poll maintenance workers right at the schools and election sites. And our staff, we grow by 3 during election time. And so we have 3 temporary employees that we pick up. We started May 10th, and we will pick up the one other person as her papers are processed. Next slide, please. Absent voting, Chapter 10 takes care of persons with disabilities that are homebound, military voters, and citizens who are overseas and off-island. When we go out to service voters who are homebound, we assign 3 to 4 different parties or groups to go out and service. Each voter, each homebound voter, will meet at least one GEC employee, a representative from the Democrat Party and the Republican Party. So when it gets busy, especially on Election Day, we have 3 to 4 groups going out to service homebound voters, and also at GMH, GRMC, and Naval Hospital on Election Day. On the same slide, we talk about provisional voting on Chapter 10. Next slide, please. The moment everybody waits for as we begin to tabulate and look at the results, that's Chapter 11. Here we slotted our systems and programming administrator and his assistant. Liz Santos and George Lujan are integral in our networks and our computer systems at the Guam Election Commission. Next slide, please. We did put a contingency just in case there's an initiative, and that's $17,500. Chapter 17 appears on this slide too, and this covers election campaign contributions and expenditures. We have 2 employees assigned for review, and their salaries show there. Please note that all the salaries of the employees, except me, involve overtime come election days, as we get closer to election. Next slide, please. A grant of $600,000 has been awarded by the U.S. Election Assistance Commission for upgrades and updates of the Guam election processes and technology. A draft proposal will be presented at the public meeting of the Guam Election Commission on Wednesday, May 16, 2018. Sidzu'us Ma'asi for the opportunity to present on zero-based budgeting and highlighting the work of the Guam Election Commission through the Election Code of Guam, Titles 3, Chapters 1 to 21. We look forward to answering any questions and providing additional information. If I cannot answer at this time, please know that the GEC has excellent young staffers that can, and the answers will be forthcoming. Siduus Maasi for your continued support of the Guam Election Commission.
Siduus Maasi, Ms. Pangilinan. I do have a number of questions that the speaker had prepared that he would like me to be able to present to you, and I know that you hinted at one of them, but I'm going to go ahead and present the question. In recent news, the Guam Election Commission was awarded federal funds, approximately $600,000 to be expended over several years. Can you provide us an update on the time period in which these funds can be expended, and what are the limitations of use for these funds?
Okay. The Guam Election Commission is in the process of accepting the award. The $600,000 can be spent inside of 5 years. It can only be spent to upgrade and update processes. The GEC cannot use it to buy ballots for a regular election. So we cannot use it for the regular operations of the GEC, but we can use it to upgrade and update.
Because you mentioned that you will be presenting the plan to the Commission later this month, can I request that following the review of the Commission of that particular plan that a copy be forwarded to the Speaker?
Yes, sir. Okay. What we'll do is I believe that it will be a draft proposal. We will collect their input, and I will keep the legislature updated as we go along.
Okay. The next question is, the Guam Election Commission is requesting for travel of approximately $33,916 to send 5 employees in May 2019 and 3 employees in July 2019 to complete Certified Elections and Registration Administration, CERA courses. From my understanding, this certification is from the Election Center, which is a not-for-profit organization that provides certain types of election certifications. Can you elaborate on these training courses and certifications?
The Election Center is the longest existing election nonprofit organization in the industry. Back in 1995, they started this certification program, and it comprises of 12 classes. So 2 of us, of the 17 employees, 2 of us are only lacking 2 courses. So they will be offered next year. It's already on the calendar. 5 of us are probably lacking only 5 classes. So unfortunately, the schedule of the Election Center is such that it's every July, 5 courses are offered, and every even year July, Guam Election Commission cannot travel. So in between time, there are courses that are offered singly, all by themselves at a special workshop. What GEC is trying to do is leverage federal funds when they're available for us to travel to federal meetings, and that's what we've done before, to these single special workshops that are offered. So my goal is to keep our 14 or 15 year-round employees credentialed and graduated from an institution of higher learning. I'm proud to announce that one of our staffers will be graduating with at the University of Guam this Sunday, May 20th, or in 2 weeks. So that's what we're trying to do. As our staffers become certified, we know that best practices will we know that we will always have access to best practices through the network.
Okay, also on the same topic, given the cash situation facing our government, can the GEC forego the need to send all the requested employees to these training sessions and possibly spread them out over a 2 or 3 year period?
Yes, we can. We have 7 years to complete the process. Mr. Senator, I'm also looking into, I've asked if the professional development can be covered inside the $600,000. That I'm looking into as we speak.
Okay, there's 3 other questions in this
No
primary
problem.
category. Is it a requirement of Guam law that any or all of your staff be certified with this specific certification?
No, not at all. It's not required, but it sure helps with making sure that we have best practices.
Okay. Is it possible for any of these courses to be administered or taken online, or possibly bring out a trainer to Guam to train your staff for a lower cost?
Okay. The costs are exorbitant if we bring the trainers here. There are 1 to 12 courses, so we wish that we were lacking all the same courses, but that's not the case. There is another program which comes with academic credit, but those programs through 2 universities are more costly than what the election center puts on.
Okay, and also one of your prior comments already answered this, but I'm going to go ahead for the record just to ask it. Can a portion of the $600,000 in federal funds be utilized to subsidize or cover the entire cost of those certification courses? And your response at that time was?
Yes. You know, I'm looking into seeing to transfer that cost if it can be covered in the $600,000 grant.
Okay. Some additional questions. There is a request for $10,000 for equipment rental such as tables and cellular phones. Can the GEC work with our Mayor's Council of Guam to assist in providing tables to decrease this equipment request?
Those tables are for the Election Return Center. We need 70 tables, 67, I'm sorry, we need 90 tables. 67 of those tables are for each of the precincts.
Okay. There is a request for $20,000 related to voter registry reports, purging. Can you elaborate on this request and how you came up with the amount requested?
We have to mail out notices to those voters that need to be removed. So we have to mail out 2 notices by law. One before their purge to notify them, and one after their purge. So most of the cost of that voter cancellation is in postage.
Okay. There is a request for vote tabulation maintenance agreement of $35,000. Can you explain this request and if such maintenance agreement is a new requirement for fiscal year 19?
That is the site support for our tabulators, and that's also inclusive of consulting services and services for the ballot production and design.
Okay. There is a request for initiative contingency of $35,000 as well as $38,000 related to litigation and $42,000 for legal services totaling $115,000. Can you explain how the GEC arrived at these budgeted figures?
Based on historical data, and already the Guam Elections Commission has been spending on litigation. So the litigation contingency is very appropriate at this time. The initiative, that just in case there's one, we will need additional funds to send out the pamphlet to educate the voters on the initiative. And I'm sorry, sir, the third...
Litigation and legal services.
Okay. Oh, so the legal services is for our retainer fee annually. So we do $3,400, I believe, a month for retainer. Then what we do is if it exceeds a certain number of hours, we have to pay. Right now, there is a case in the district court with us.
Okay. There is a request for computer hardware replacements of $41,780. According to the GEC's equipment listing, it has 16 total computers/laptops. Is it possible for the GEC to forego all or a portion of the purchase of these computer hardware replacements for fiscal year 2019?
Sir, with the cybersecurity issues at the forefront, we need to ensure that we are inside that arena where we're still waiting for our assessment of our systems with the Homeland Security. And so we, again, with that, sir, if it's the hardware that will meet not the requirements or to meet the what Homeland Security recommends. Again, that part of the budget, I will let you all know if I can move that to the grant.
Okay, so if you can get back to
Yes,
the
we will.
Speaker as you formulate any ultimate decisions on that. I will now open the floor for any questions from the senators here. Senator Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real quick, Mrs. Pangilinan, thank you for your presentation. The $600,000 grant that will be used for upgrades, process regarding technology improvements. Are you working in consultation or working closely with the Office of Technology regarding putting together this draft proposal?
Senator, may I clarify that it's not only technology, or it's not only cyber security, but it's also physical security. So with Office of Technology, we are working with them with our DMV project. So yes, we will reach out to them as we go. More so with cybersecurity, through the U.S. Election Assistance Commission and the National Association of State Election Directors, we are working with them and collaborating with local Homeland Security with all those issues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Morrison. Senator Torres.
Thank you, Mrs. Pangilinan. I had a question with regard to your advertising request for 2019. I noticed that your request for 2019 budget is $50,000, but the authorized fiscal year 2018 was only $20,000. Could you explain the more than double amount requested for the upcoming fiscal year?
Thank you, Senator. The Guam Election Commission was authorized to use the surplus or the residual of the fiscal year 2018 budget, 17 budget. So for the fiscal year 2018, we had budgeted part of the advertising through our continuing appropriation of fiscal year 2017. So the difference is made up from the continuing appropriation of fiscal year 2017 for the primary election.
Is that generally what you expect to expend in one election cycle?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, the full-page color ads that you generally run?
Ma'am, we even have to print by law the names of all our precinct officials. We have to have notices 3 times of several of the processes.
Okay. And then I wanted to ask you about the salaries that you reflect in your summary. That is inclusive of overtime or no?
Yes, ma'am.
That's the total cost, benefits, overtime,
yes,
everything.
Yes.
All right. And the reason I ask is, as you recall, when you were here for last year's budget, one of the discussion points was overtime and what the conditions were that led to excessive overtime. And a lot of it was fulfilling the requirements of between the primary election and the general election of ensuring that all overseas uniform citizens and absentee voters receive their packets in sufficient time in accordance with the federal law, which I believe was a 45-day grace period between the certification of the ballots and the actual general election date. And as you recall, is in an effort to alleviate some of the burden on you, I had introduced Bill 82-34, which would have moved up the date of the primary election by 3 weeks, which in effect would allow the GEC more time and not put the GEC in a position where they would have to work overtime to meet those timelines in order to comply with federal law. Unfortunately, Bill 82, although it passed by over 11 votes by the legislature, was vetoed by the governor's office. And I just wanted to pose to you, if you would be, if you agree that this measure could be an effective measure in reducing overtime costs, which at the time, I believe when we passed the legislation, the estimate was upwards of 90,000. Would that situation would still present itself this coming election, correct?
Yes, ma'am, and the GEC thanks you for your efforts. I think Guam primary election is one of the latest throughout all 50 states and the 4 jurisdictions. Our primary is one of the latest. That is a great measure to save money. It will decrease over time. Because if we have a 45-day window in between the primary and the general, you can see us, and we invite anybody to come in to see what we have to do to get that done. Senator, the other, I am so aware and appreciative of what's going on with the government of Guam budget. Mm-hmm. There may be something immediate as well in terms of cost cutting. In the past, through several legislatures, intermittently, primary elections were canceled when unnecessary. Yes. So what we've asked is, if, for example, the public auditor, if there are 2 or less candidates for the primary election, if we cancel the primary, if there are only 2 or less number of candidates, printing costs alone, the government of Guam can save $20,000. And that's not inclusive of tabulation. Because it's required that it be in a separate ballot, not necessarily a separate ballot sheet, but especially for the primary, it has to be a separate ballot sheet. That means we order 2 sets of ballot sheets. Between
the time that the bill 82-34 was vetoed till now, would you say that generally, I mean, even looking at going forward, I suppose the effect on the budget would have to be on this year's budget. Actually, let me rethink this, because we don't have another election until 2 years from now.
That's
so
correct.
There's really no way to affect that at this period. But perhaps it's a measure for.
We would really appreciate it. Yes.
Okay. And then with regard to legal services, you did have a contingency built in, right, in the event that because I saw that your legal services bill amount from last fiscal year to this fiscal year there's only a variance of a couple $1,000s, but you do have a contingency built in, you said?
A separate line item in budget category 230.
230. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Torres. No further questions or comments. Thank you very much for your response, and you'll be hearing from the Speaker.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pangilinan. At this time, we're going to go ahead and proceed and invite the Guam Regional Transit Authority representatives. And for the information of the public, they have all been sworn in by the Sergeant at Arms, so that particular matter has been administered. And Mr. Augustine, if you can just identify for yourself for the record, identify any of your staff members that have joined you at the table, and then you can proceed with your testimony.
Mr. Chair, the person to my immediate right is Myra Soriano. He's my administrative officer. And to her right is Mr. Raleigh Filipina. He's the chief planner for GRTA.
Okay, you may proceed.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Senator Torres, Senator Morrison. I am Enrique Augustine, the executive manager for the Guam Regional Transit Authority. We will try to follow the bullet points that was given to us in preparation for this budget. GRTA's core mission is to provide the basic privilege of mobility to the community through a reliable, accessible, and cost-effective public transportation. A transportation system for the general public and individuals with disabilities. GRTA provides two services: paratransit for people with disabilities and fixed route for people that go to designated places. On the road, we have bus shelters where people with fixed route needs would go to. GRTA has a total of 236,853 riders for fiscal year 17. 24% were paratransit, or the amount of 55,898. 76% were for fixed route, of 180,955 rides. Most, if not all, of our riders ride the bus out of necessity to go to work, to their medical appointments, to schools, and wherever they need to go. GRTA's specific metrics used to determine if our core mission is being achieved are for both services. We collect data on ridership counts, daily fleet status, making sure 12 buses are out on the road, 6 for each service. However, for paratransit, we collect data on ride denial, on-time performance, and the active paratransit holders. Initially, long before the GBB process was told to the directors, GRTA went and we were seeking an appropriation of $3,666,563 for the operation is equivalent to what was funded for FY 2018. However, due to the revised fiscal realignment plan submitted to the legislature on March 28, the budget limit for GRTA was reduced to $3,230,663. This is a $435,899% decrease, or a shortage of 11.8%. That's a very big drop. On the next page, you will see the breakdown. GRTA was given a budget ceiling for $3,230,663, broken down into Guam Highway Fund and Public Transit Fund. These are all special funds. We do not use general funds. For the Guam Highway Fund, we were given $456,000. $382 for the Public Transit Fund. For the Guam Highway Funds is $2,774,271, and for the Public Transit Fund, it's $456,382. On the next two bullets, the total amount requested for each division and the total amount requested for the total number of existing employees in each division. We have 5 divisions. We don't really call them divisions, but for the purpose of of this budget hearing, we have 5, which is the Executive Manager's Office, the Administrative and Technical Support Division, Planning Division, Federal Grant Administration Division, and the Public Transportation Service Division. Under the Executive Manager's Office, we have 2 employees, and that's myself and the Board Secretary, who is also my secretary. A total of $177,330 is assigned to this particular salary and benefits. $3,200 is to fund for supplies and materials required for the board meetings, including telephone for myself. On our second division, Administrative and Technical Support, we have 2 individuals, the Administrative Officer and the Customer Service Representative, a total of $166,484. For personnel alone, both salary and benefit, the 2 people would require $120,584 for contractual, which is to fund services such as Xerox, copier, internet, legal service, aircon and office maintenance services, printing, advertisement, subscription, membership dues, and board stipend. Our third division is the Planning Division, in which we have the Chief Planner. For his salary and benefit, it's $87,345. For operation, to fund for supplies and materials, including telephone. For contractual, this is monies to fund bus service operation, fuel and fabrication of bus route schedules, installation of solar system, and basically to light up and make our terminals secure. That amount is $2,288,138, or a total of $2,378,683. Our fourth division, let me go back a little bit. Within the Planning Division, we have 2 other people, and that's the Planner 2 and Planning Technician 1. Those are all federally funded, both for their salaries and for their benefit. Under the Federal Grant Administration, we have 2 people, a total of $127,658 for both salary and benefit, and $3,200 is requested for supplies and materials, including telephone. The last division that I have is the Public Operations Services Division. This person serves as the contract administrator, oversees the day-to-day operation of the Guam Public Transit, ensures that all vehicle fleet are in good operational condition, and schedule and plan the maintenance and repair, develop and administer work safety programs, policies. He also keeps inventory of repair parts and annual renewal of vehicle for their license and safety checks. That person, total benefit and salary is $49,108, and $3,200 is for supplies and material. Additionally, for contractual, $325,000. This amount is for the GRTA fleet repair and maintenance contract. The total amount requested for and the total amount funded vacant position. GRTA is not requesting for any additional position for FY19. However, it was noted that in our FY 2019 proposed staffing pattern, funding of $45,014 was removed. This position was approved and budgeted for last year, the Management Analyst 4. Mr. Speaker, members of this committee, this position, as I said, was funded, and we would like to have that position restored because we are trying to find a person that would assist the administrative officer because he is retiring, and we want this position to be filled so that we can at least have some cross-training before the administrative officer retires this year. Although our transit service on Mondays through Saturdays, 5:30 in the morning to 8:30 at night, 6 days a week, we do not incur overtime. We do not pay lease for our office space. We do not pay for utilities. We do not use Government of Guam funds for off-island travel. And we do not celebrate our annual agency week, a normal practice amongst other Government of Guam agencies. And lastly, we do our own janitorial cleaning in-house. GRTA is a lean organization, and we will stay that way, and we will stay within our budget. On the next page is a pie chart that will show where all this money is used. If you note, it's only 17.29% of that is for personnel. The large majority goes to contractual, which is basically operation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Augustine, for your presentation. I do have a few questions that were prepared by the Chair of Appropriations and Adjudication Committee. So I'm going to go ahead and present them. The first question is, the GRTA request includes contractual services for bus transportation services, including fuel and lube, of $1.5 million from the Guam Highway Fund and $456,000 from the Public Transit Fund. Is this amount enough to sustain the current operational routes of the GRTA in fiscal year 2019?
No, this amount is not sufficient. However, we have another source of funding, which is the federal funds. And on top of that, we use our bus fare collection. It's a non-appropriated fund to fill in wherever we need to use money to augment what is short from the Government of Guam.
Okay, so your response was, no, it's not enough, but you have federal funds that will be utilized to augment it, your requirements. And then you also have the bus fares, those resources that will be utilized. So again, the question is this amount all-inclusive? The $1.5 million, the $456,000, and then because you added those two options, the federal use of federal funds and then the bus fares. So I'm going to make it an all-inclusive question now. Is the entire amount that you share with us enough to sustain the current operational routes of the GRTA in 2019, in fiscal year 2019?
Right. I'm going to go ahead and refer that to Mara.
Thank you, Mr. Augustine.
Thank you. Good afternoon, all senators.
Good afternoon.
Okay, you're asking if the proposed budget for FY19 of $3,230,663 would be enough to fund the FY19 operation of GRTA.
To fund the current operational routes.
The current.
In fiscal year 2019, yes.
Okay. The current budget, which is 2018 of $3,662,000, I believe that will be sufficient enough up to the end of the fiscal year, because we have the grant that we are expecting to come in that will augment whatever is the shortage from the local funds. But if you're going to ask me about the upcoming fiscal year of FY19, I believe it will not be enough, Senator. So that's all I can say. For this fiscal year, we are doing the best we can in our power to stretch our budget, and we are going to live within our means in order to manage through up to the end of the fiscal year to be able to make our mission and be able to provide our services to our riders and to the people of Guam.
Thank you very much for your response, and thank you, Mr. Augustine. So just in reference to this fiscal year, your direct response is based on the existing appropriation and other sources of funding that you can utilize, that you have access to, that should be sufficient for fiscal year 18. Now, the question was, with the amount that has been forwarded, and this is the amount, and I need to make it clear to the public that the request by the Guam Regional Transit Authority totals $3,230,663 for fiscal year 19, based on resources that would come. The funds would come from the Guam Highway Fund as well as the Public Transit Fund. And Mr. Augustine, you made it very clear that in terms of the $3.2 million, that it is a reduction from what you have allocated for fiscal year 18. So I just want to make sure that the public understand that what was provided in fiscal year 18 will be reduced by approximately $400-some-thousand, and that reduced request is from the executive branch. Okay, because incidentally there may be situations in the future where questions are raised, but we will work on, I'll leave it to the Speaker and the Chair of Appropriations to see what we can do to be able to ensure that not only you get the budget that is being requested, but if there are any additional resources, then I'm sure the Speaker would identify it. The biggest concern, it goes back to the question that was posed about sustaining current routes and operations. That is really where that question originated from. So, and it's focused towards existing services. Now, the second question, there is a request for office supplies and materials and fuel of $200,000. Can you explain what portion of the $200,000 of this request is related to fuel and what portion is related to office supplies and materials?
Okay. Are you talking about the $3,200 that has been appropriated for operations for each division?
I'm referring to the total allocation under office supplies and materials, comma, fuel. It adds up to $200,000.
Okay.
So
right.
of that
Let
amount,
me go back to that. Okay.
what is the fuel? Can we separate the fuel versus the office supplies and materials?
Okay. Originally, during our budget request, we were requesting for $200,000 for fuel expense. Okay, and I requested $10,000 for supplies and materials, for office supplies. Okay, which I believe the $10,000 office supplies is not enough. But we believe that because we were given a budget ceiling of 3.2, we have to fit our request within the budget ceiling that was given to us. So what happened was when we submitted our budget request to BBMR, they consolidated the 10,000 requests, my request for office supplies and materials, to the 200,000 fuel for the bus operation services. So they make it as a whole 200,000 for office supplies and materials and fuel.
So based on your explanation,
Yes.
Ms. Abaya, so would it be correct to say that out of the $200,000 that is allocated for office supplies, materials, and fuel, that of that $10,000 will be utilized specifically for office supplies and materials.
Correct, Senator.
And
The
the remaining
10,000
balance?
would be for the office supplies and materials, and the 190,000 would be funding for fuel.
For fuel.
Since the fuel is being charged to office supplies in the AS400, that's why it has been placed under 240 object class category.
Okay, understood. GRTA is projected to receive approximately $1,417,486 in 100% federal funds from the Federal Transit Administration. It is noted in GRTA's budget request that these funds are not awarded as of the submission of your request. Does GRTA expect these federal grants to be awarded for fiscal year 19?
Senator, the application for the FY 2018 grant is not submitted because the Congress of the United States and the President, the U.S. Congress and President of the United States didn't sign the budget bill year for the expenditure for the transit. So usually we get a Federal Register announcement around July to get the budget for that year. So with that, when we receive the notice, we apply for the grant. And we're hoping that we can get $1,400,000 again, just like what we got last year.
So the time frame in terms of receiving a confirmation of how much and when you'll be able to access the federal funds is not until July? Is that?
As soon as the Federal Register announcement is out by around July, we would see the breakdown of the funding, because we're getting so many allocation from so many federal programs. So from there, we'll base our application in regards to what they've given us, and that's the time we can apply for the grant.
So the application, Mr. Augustine, has yet to be submitted? I'm trying to understand whether the application has been submitted but is still pending Congress passage of the budget, or is it in July you'll be able to understand exactly what may be eligible to apply for, and then you submit an application for the next fiscal year?
Yeah, that's right.
What's the process?
Okay, we have to get a notice first in regards to the amount that we're getting that fiscal year, when the President and U.S. Congress approve the bill, and that's the time we can submit the grant application.
Right.
Okay.
Those are formally grants and for our bus service operation, and it's based on demographics. We typically get between $800,000 to $900,000 a year, and we use those funds on the last quarter of the fiscal year. So that's how we base our budget.
Okay, so in this particular case, in July, the notification will come out for the formula grant, and then you have to submit your request in terms of how you're going to expend those resources.
That's true.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification. It really comes down again to the ridership and whether, in fact, Guam Regional Transit Authority is able to sustain and to maintain the existing routes that you presently have, because we certainly don't want to reach a point where the budget is passed in August and then the ridership will not be aware of exactly what possible changes may result or come about as a result of the budget that will be considered and passed. So just to share that perspective coming from this angle in terms of ensuring that at least we can try to accommodate the ridership as much as possible, but they also need some information ahead of time. So
Absolutely.
okay. Thank you, Mr. Augustine, and thank you, Myra. Thank you, Raleigh. Senator Morrison?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Section 6102 of 12 GCA, GRTA's enabling statute, provides the agency with exclusive franchise for the furnishing of public transportation within Guam and on its roads and highways, to collect and administer fees for furnishing, operation, and the maintenance of public parking on Guam. And I'm sure you're aware of this enabling statute, Sir Augustine, and I'm just curious to know if maybe this is part of the overall plan if it's being explored or seeing what other revenue sources are being looked at, to your standpoint?
Okay. Senator, there is a public transit business plan approved back in 2010. That is a sub-part of the Guam 2030 transportation plan. We cannot and we have not executed on the transit business plan because there is no funds allocated for that plan. Yes, it's true that we can install parking meters and parking garages, except for the Guam Memorial, I mean not the Guam Memorial, but the airport and seaport. But I think that before we start putting up parking meters, we would definitely need to have a public hearing and do a AAA process, because I've already talked to people about this and there's already a lot of pushback. We're not going to be paying parking meters. Guam is not that yet sophisticated or in the terms of installing those, because it costs money to buy parking meters, to install it, to have somebody monitor it, and to take care that the monies are not stolen throughout the night. Other parking meters, of course, you can use, for example, back in the States, you can use a credit card. Parking garages, those are all very expensive things to do. At the current budget that we have, we cannot install any of those.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to point that out, and I appreciate the response. At least we, the public, to know that this is in the enabling statute that allows for the agency to seek revenue sources,
yes,
or they have that authority to explore other revenue sources outside legislative appropriations or other funding sources that come, yes, from this body. So I just wanted to point that out. Also, have the agency considered the legality and feasibility of, I don't know if you recall, with regards to the vans and the buses, to allow for advertising on the vans and buses for other revenue sources?
We have had approved by our board about a year ago to use $50,000 for advertisement. And they've told us that once we find that $50,000, then we would go out and hire a firm that would help us with installing or coming up with a marketing plan to be able to effectively use those advertisements. Currently, I don't think our ridership would appreciate a Gucci bag inside of or side of the buses when our current ridership can barely afford to ride the bus. So we are going to be looking at all of those. There are instances where we wanted to help the village mayors, for example, as a test to advertise, mango festival or coconut or crab festival. We could probably put a standard size ad on the outside for free to help out the mayors.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Augustine. Again, I'm just pointing out some options here that I know you're aware of. Maybe the public should hear that there are options outside of the legislative appropriation. Last one, Mr. Augustine, is recently we passed Bill 208. This is the Transportation Network Company Service Act, and this provides a regulatory framework for the ride-sharing industry in Guam. Examples like Uber and Grabs in the Philippines. Have you met with the folks in the industry and looked at the possibility of integrating this type of method in the overall public transportation system, since it's...
Yes, I have met, and the name of the company here in Guam I forgot the name of the person, but we did have a discussion when he first opened up his business. And basically, the concept is people will drive around, and if they're available, they'll pick you up for a cost. Now, remember that when you ride, if you're disabled, whoever owns that car that's out in the public making money have to be ADA compliant. The driver also has to have training for ADA compliant. On top of that, if a car owner uses a concept like Uber, for example, and they get involved in an accident, where would transit be? What would be our position when they sue not only that company, but transit, because we use those kind of private commercial transportation. So it's very delicate, it's doable in other places, but that also requires legislation.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you're having these conversations. We need to explore that. We're seeing it's a growing industry in Guam, and that it actually had this body provide a framework for the industry to grow. So I appreciate that you're having those conversations with the industry and seeing how it could be integrated into the overall system. Last question. I noticed, Mr. Chair. Do you have a tracking of what is the average wait time for riders? What are the plans going forward? Because I know that it has improved and there's times it fluctuates, but are you looking at tracking of how these wait times could have better turnarounds?
Yes, we do track those. I don't have it with me right away, but we can send that to you. We track pickup times and picking them up to take them home. Around 62% for pickup in the morning, and dropping off at night, especially people that goes to the hospital or dialysis. It's probably around 82%, but we will give you a more accurate picture of that by sending you the graphs that we keep and the statistics that we keep.
All right. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Morrison. Senator Torres?
Thank you, Mr. Augustine. Yeah, I just want to acknowledge that one of my employees is a regular bus rider, and I just want to thank your contractor in your office for getting him to work on time every day.
Thank you.
And I know that it's quite a challenge, but that is one of the upsides that I see to the program.
PAPS has been very vocal in the past, and I think that he's seen a lot of improvement, but not to the point where we can all be jumping up and celebrating.
I did have a question, though, with regard to the federal grants, because I noticed that there are 4 types of federal grants that are that you avail yourself with: the Other Than Urbanized Area Formula Grant, the Rural Transit Assistance Program, the Enhanced Mobility of Seniors and Individuals with Disabilities, and bus-related facilities grants program. You did have a projected number of 1.47, but then I thought I heard you say that you received last year about 800,000 to 900,000 of that. Is that correct? Or did you receive 1.4 million?
Senator, last year we received around $1.4 million.
Okay.
But previous to that, we received 1.6, but there was a carryover from the previous fiscal year. But on average, we get around 1.4.
What I'm trying to understand is if you rely on this money, because you mentioned that the announcement is made in July, the grant application is submitted shortly thereafter, and then the award is made, and the grant monies are realized towards the last quarter of the fiscal year. That's correct?
That's correct, Senator.
So does this money, then, this 1.47, is this over and above your budget ceiling request of 3.2? Or is it, I'm trying to understand how that money that comes at the end is built into your operations and your expenses.
Part of that money goes to state administration, and on the state administration, which is 15%, we pay for the 2 unclassified federally funded positions.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So not all of the money that you see is for bus operation. We also have other funds, but it's a competitive grant process where we compete for monies for buses, for example.
What I'm getting at, Mr. Augustine, is does this provide you an opportunity to have monies in excess of what you've projected and appropriated for certain expenses and contracts. Does this pot of grant money provide you an opportunity to invest in your services, or is it a wash somehow because of a shortage of funds being realized? I mean, I just don't understand how that later grant money said that if you look at in your budget projection, it's all just projected. There's no, it's not built into your budget, and I'm trying to understand how it translates.
Okay, let me answer that, Senator. Okay, for your information, we are projecting bus operation costs for FY17 3.5 million. Okay, that 3.5 million is approximately it's the amount that we're looking at to expend at the end of the fiscal year. But looking at the budget that we were appropriated for FY17 of 3,666,000, only 2,738,836 was going to the bus operation services. So in other words, if we are projecting 3.5 million for bus operation and the local money is only 2.7, so that means the shortage is coming out from the federal funds. That's how we operate.
That's what I was trying to understand.
Yes. So towards the end of the last quarter of the fiscal year, we are already using federal funds so that we can go ahead and proceed over up to the end of the fiscal year with our bus operation services. That's okay.
Yes, I understand, and I think I'm satisfied. I'll just delve a little bit more outside of this venue if needed. Thank you.
Without the federal funds, I don't think we can be able to, manage through up to the end of the fiscal year. So we are very lucky that we get federal funds.
So of the 3.6 that you were appropriated last fiscal year, you only received, or you will only receive in fiscal year 2018 about 2.7 is what you just said. Is that correct?
Yeah, we were the only 2.738 was for contractual. Okay, was appropriated for contractual. But out of that amount, we also have other miscellaneous contractual services, like, our Xerox copier lease, our internet, our drinking water delivery, print advertisements.
What about maintenance
all
of the
those
vehicles?
little contractual services amounted to 270,000. So we had to deduct it from the contractual services that was appropriated to us for FY18.
What about the maintenance, the vehicle maintenance?
There's no money for vehicle maintenance, and we're using NAF to the tune of $100,000. Those are money coming from our bus fares, and that's the current procurement that we submit to get an IFB for maintenance. In the meantime, we're using BPAs and IDIQs to keep these buses running until that IFB has been awarded.
And that's your approximate revenue from bus fares, about $100,000 for the year?
We get about $9,000 a month.
Okay.
So it fluctuates between maybe 110, 120. We also use those money to fix our bus shelters, bus benches, ground maintenance, and anything else that we can use to make sure that transit is not just about buses. There are other components of the system.
It's not a whole lot of money.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senator Torres, Mr. Augustine, Ms. Abaya, and Mr. Pilipina. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. If there are any follow-up questions with regards to your budgetary allocation, as requested by the governor's office, then you'll be hearing from Speaker Cruz's committee. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senators.
To Tuesday, May 15, 2018, at 9:30 a.m., when we will reconvene with the Department of Chamorro Affairs, the Guam Museum, the Hagåtña Restoration and Redevelopment Authority, the Guam Educational Telecommunications Corporation, and the Council on the Arts and Humanities Agencies. Thank you very much. Have a good day, everyone. And to our mothers, happy Mother's Day.